and so it wasn't the government, there wasn't the Federal Reserve printing dollars. But as you say, the federal government, they say they hate monopolies, but they love the monopoly when they hold it. They're always accusing, businesses of being monopolies, but the real monopoly that you have to worry about is the one the federal government has, in this case, money creation.
Howdy. I'm Hannah Newich-Schwander, a production lead at a soybean seed facility in Central Illinois, and you're listening to the Vance Crow Podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm glad you're here. Today, we sit down with Bob Gelfond. Bob is a currency trader, small L libertarian, and really amazing man that I had a chance to meet a few weeks ago while on a trip to New York City. Bob and I sit down to have a fascinating conversation about the state of being a libertarian, some of the justice projects he's worked on, and then we talk about the Federal Reserve and currencies and his experience trading currencies, and then go on to talk about all the different ways that Bob has invested in technology. Bob was one of the original investors into Amazon, and he gives a firsthand look into what he was investing in all those years ago when Amazon was just an idea before it had even sold a single book. We're going to get to that interview in just a moment, but first, I want to talk about legacy interviews. Longtime listeners of the podcast know that I sit down with individuals and couples to record their life stories so that future generations have an opportunity to know their family story. Over the last few months, we have done a bunch of couples interviews where mom and dad are sitting down together and talking about how they met, what their marriage was like, how parenting went, and the wisdom that they've learned together as a couple. When I near the end of a couple's interview, I always ask some version of, tell me what made this person so special to you over all those years. And when I ask the dad this question, he almost always makes a joke, and they both kind of nervously laugh. But then it gets serious. And the father usually takes a moment to pause, to think about what he's going to say, and you watch this woman who's been married to this man sometimes 30, 50 years turn into that 20-something-year-old woman that fell in love with this man so long ago. She's looking at him expectantly, maybe wondering if he's going to say something that she really cares about, and always, Dad says something really profound. It's not always complicated, it doesn't always have this perfect bow on it, but it's always something deeply meaningful, and you get to watch this couple have a spark. In fact, just last week, we had a couple in here, and the father started crying, and he was a little bit embarrassed, and the mom said, maybe we can cut this part out. And the dad said, no, I want my grandchildren to know that this is how they should feel before they get married so that they can have the sort of relationship that I had with you. These sorts of moments happen in legacy interviews because an outsider like me can sit down and ask your parents questions that allow them to open up and share in ways that they don't always do when they're with the rest of the family. If you're interested in having me record an interview with your loved ones, go to legacyinterviews.com to find out more. All right, without further ado, let's head to the interview with Bob Gelfond. Bob Gelfond, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Vance.
So you're a libertarian, so maybe the best first question to ask you is, who will build the roads?
First of all, I should make sure that people understand I'm a small L libertarian, which means I have no affiliation with the Libertarian Party, which is a different animal. So I mean, we're a long way from this worldview, but certainly in theory, private actors are certainly capable of building roads, charging tolls. I mean, I actually do see this in certain places on highways where private firms charge tolls on roads, and so you get incentives for them to upkeep the roads, for them to provide the latest and greatest technology. You also don't end up with things like we have here in New York City, where I am, where they're in the process of repaving the roads, They dig up one road, actually the road in front of the street in front of our house, our apartment building. Was unpaved for close to 2 months. They pave it then in the middle of the day, so traffic gets stopped. It's no cost to them. It doesn't matter how many tens of thousands or maybe even, more than that, of dollars of lost time that gets, that gets cost to individuals. Because there's no, they're not incentivized to do it quickly, whereas a private firm would want to get that road back in service as quickly as possible. They do it at 4 a.m., Sunday, and it'd be done at 6 a.m., ready for rush hour.
So when you delineate that you are a small L libertarian, why do you make sure to make that point so clearly?
Well, the Libertarian Party, has, there's a lot of people under that in that tent, and there have been voices, and I don't follow it as super close, but I know there have been voices that are not what I would view as being, let's call it the classical liberal tradition, and so it's important to distinguish between the two.
Yeah, classical liberal, that's something that I don't think I'd ever heard until maybe 10 years ago. And then it's a term that gets thrown around a lot. People say, I'm a classical, but they never really describe what it is. So could you kind of lay out what that actually means?
I think in general, and this is also talking about small L libertarianism, it's about having a very limited government, and really one that if you read our Constitution, I think if someone said that if we add an amendment to the Constitution, it should be, we really mean it. It actually gives the federal government very few powers, more powers to states and localities, and so it should be very limited. It should all be about the ideas that individuals are the sovereigns. They give certain powers to the government to secure the blessings of liberty. And essentially, everyone should be free to live their life as long as you're not infringing on my right to live my life. I think that's maybe the best summary.
So when you think about people becoming a libertarian, like for me, I think I've always had these political leanings, and I kind of always thought that the parties represented this. And then you become an adult and you realize, like, no, people don't necessarily want freedom. They want comfort from the government. They want subsidies. They want protection. Why do you think that the mass of the population goes towards either Democrats or Republicans as opposed to this kind of libertarian ideal?
Well, I think Americans, are, they don't describe themselves as libertarian, but I think the founding of our nation and that sort of thing was built on libertarian ideals, and unfortunately there are politicians whose job it is to get elected, and the way they get elected is by giving goodies to people, and it's called dispersed costs and concentrated benefits. So people see the benefits of maybe it's some sort of subsidy for something they're buying, or now you see forgiveness for student loans. It could be all sorts of things. It's basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. But the amount that Peter gets robbed is so small that it's not enough for him to say, what's going on here. And politicians are very good at covering up the costs of those sort of things, or they hide the costs so that they don't really get borne by anyone for years, out in the future. A lot of localities or states. The politicians work a deal with the unions for these very generous pension plans, and of course the pensions, don't the bills on those don't come due until they're long out of office.
Yeah, so you have been active in the libertarian movement for a long time. One of the things, why don't you talk about some of the ways that you're active, and then we can go into more specifics.
Well, it's primarily been supporting a number of libertarian free market groups that do various things. I'm on the board of the Institute for Justice. They they take on legal cases pro bono, suing the government for a variety of things, although they focus on areas of private property rights, free speech. They also get involved in, they have been very involved in school choice, but we really, from a legal point of view, have sort of cleared the decks. It's all the constitutional hurdles have really been eliminated now. It's just a question of the political will to implement, and there's a lot of focus now instead of cases where we see public officials using their power to punish people for their political views or for exercising their free speech and criticizing policies. Cases of qualified immunity where doesn't necessarily have to be a policeman, might be some sort of government official, is really abusive in their power that they're exercising way beyond just a mistaken judgment, and there's no way to punish them essentially for for their wrongful act. The other group that I'm on the board of is the Cato Institute, which is they're strictly promote various policies, and they know that we're not affiliated with any party. I think we have, and we're respected for having an intellectual honesty that people from both sides can trust. The research that gets produced, the opinion papers that get produced, they may not agree with it, but they at least view Cato as an honest actor. And unfortunately, too often, a lot of the think tanks in Washington, it's more about supporting the blue team or the red team, whichever side they're on, and often tying themselves in knots and losing their principles in the process. And Cato does not do that. And so I'm very proud to be affiliated with both organizations.
You mentioned the causes for justice that you've been involved in. You've personally, contributed and been active. Are there any cases that really stick out to you that seem like a long shot a long time ago, and now you won or at least made progress on?
Well, a lot of them, school choice is a good example. It took many years, many cases. The lawyers at IJ are very strategic. It's that there's many injustices out there. Unfortunately, we can't address them all. But if they've taken this approach of looking for cases where we can essentially get leverage, and not just correct the injustice of that specific case, but create broader reforms that will hopefully prevent take these things off the board. I mean, one good case where even we lost, actually the one Supreme case we lost, which was a famous case, Suzette Kelo in New Canaan, Connecticut. Her property, her home, was taken by the city for use in a private sense. The Fifth Amendment does allow governments to take property if it's being taken for a public use, typically thought of as being a road, a military base, something like that. Here they were taking it for clearly a private use. They were giving it to a private corporation and arguing that, well, there would be more public taxes, and that was a public benefit. And we lost that case 5-4, but it enraged so many people around the country that even though we lost the case, we were able to get legislative reforms in many states. And in some cases also state constitutions offer stronger protections for property owners. And then we've had wins there as well. And then, we do hope someday to have the Supreme Court revisit the case and perhaps get a better result from them.
Yeah, one case that I think IJ has taken on, I don't know if you know the specifics of it, but we spoke about it a little bit. It was brought to my attention by a journalist named Chris Bennett, who points out that there's all these federal officials that are going on to people's property, ostensibly in rural areas, to say, oh, well, we need to monitor the game here, so we're going to put up cameras, we're going to do monitoring, we're going to trespass on your property, and because we are overseeing the king's deer, we get to do this. That's one that really sticks close to my heart, because, I mean, if there's something that should be sacrosanct, it should be that you have property and that you determine who can come on that land. And where are you at on that idea?
Yeah, unfortunately, the protections afforded by the Fourth Amendment, that we're supposed to be secure in our home, that the government should get a warrant before they the search or come onto private property, have been watered down quite a bit over the years. There's and I'm not a lawyer, so tagging one here is it might be a little bit dangerous. But there's if they talk about open fields where the government can look at things where they say there's no expectation of privacy, but in some of the cases that you're talking about, where there may be hunting, let's say, on a person's property, these game wardens are coming on not because they heard a case, something wrong was going on, some regulation was being violated, but they're just coming to check up, and that's not what the police or any peace officer should be doing. You should only be subject to investigation if there's sufficient evidence to suggest there might be wrongdoing, and the police or government officials should have to go get a warrant to go make their case in front of a judge to say, we have probable cause or this is going on, and get the warrant from the judge, and then go on. So we do have some cases, similar to what you discussed, and I'm not sure where they stand right now, but hopefully we will win, and certainly improving the Fourth Amendment protections is something that is very important to everybody, and it's something that IJ is working on.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's like almost difficult to imagine how someone could justify doing it, right? Where you're like, but how could you possibly imagine that it would be okay to set up these cameras, or just because I don't mow this area that it no longer counts as, I think the word is curtilage.
And it's more than that. There case. I mean, it's not an IJ case, but I had a friend. They were doing a remodeling of their home in a suburban area, and the town sent in drones onto their property, looking in windows. I mean, there wasn't anybody living there on the time because it was construction still, but that's not supposed to happen. Wasn't that, somebody didn't report a violation of building code or whatever it might have been. It's crazy. And unfortunately, technology is allowing, while there's great benefits of technology, it also allows governments to become more intrusive if they're not being held back by, the Constitution and other, laws to prevent the government from exploiting that technology to investigate people and properties.
Yeah, drones are a good example. In St. Louis, there have been now two different proposals. One time it got shot down, but it's back now. They're saying, look, you don't give us enough money to keep police on patrol, so what we'd like to do is have a private company come in, and we're going to use drones to surveil, particularly in large urban areas. To me, this is very dystopian. I don't know what protection you can have if the drones, are hovering around on streets, but it seems very dark to allow a world in which you're surveilled by, tiny robotic helicopters.
Yeah, I think it has to be careful. It's one thing if it's happening on, clearly in public areas. The cases, I was talking about before, this is talking about private property, where there's the Fourth Amendment makes it clear that you should be secure in your home, in your possessions. Public streets, public, parks, things like that. I can see the case, but it's different. Let's take care of the obvious cases first before we worry about more extreme measures. There's a lot of work to be done before we get to these other cases.
So you've had a long experience as in currency trading and in all sorts of investing, and you're a libertarian. So where does this put you with the idea of a Federal Reserve and the ability to print money and to issue treasuries and bonds? How do you feel about this with your political belief system?
So I think the Federal Reserve is a mistake. I believe that we should have a competitive currency system where currencies are produced by private actors. I mean, currency, money, if you will, is really a product. We don't think of it that way. We sort of put it on a pedestal as some sort of special thing, but it's really a product. It's a way it was an invention to make it easier to trade. And originally people bartered. That's not so easy. They used in some areas they might use livestock as a source of wealth, a store of wealth. There all sorts of things came about, but of course, precious metals became the dominant means of storing wealth, and we had money based on gold, or it might be silver. There's pluses and minuses, but governments, if they're given a monopoly, even in a gold system, would abuse that privilege, and it's essentially what happened. In the U.S., more and more debt pressure is put on to devalue the price of gold, and in a competitive system, and people think that it sounds very strange, and when you hear it for the first time, but it's something that companies. Private actors could compete, and like any other product, competition makes that product better. And it's not that you end up with just one currency made by produced by Apple or Amazon. As with any product, you'd have multiple products and multiple currencies out there. Bitcoin is cryptocurrencies are possible solution there. But it should be competitive and let the markets figure out what's good, what's bad. Now you have a very dangerous situation where the Fed for many years bought up not all the debt, but a large percentage of the debt that the U.S. federal government was creating, and it made it very easy for the federal government to spend on all sorts of things, and with all the negative effects that's happened that created. Now the debt is over 100% of GDP. Interest is taken over even defense spending as a huge item on the budget, and it's unfortunately only going to go north from there, unless there's some sort of substantial fiscal changes taken, which doesn't seem to be in the offing, regardless of who gets elected in November. So I had an idea that I wrote about many years ago, and not that this is necessarily the solution, but just as a plausible alternative. One thing about the cryptocurrencies is that they don't have backing. A gold-based system has gold, but you can always argue what's the value of gold. I mean, it's been a store of wealth for thousands of years, and that's that sort of evolutionary advantage that it has is a good argument. But there could be other things, and my suggestion was, well, computing has become a dominant thing in our lives. Maybe we could use cloud computing as a backing for a type of currency. And then people could hold that currency, convert it. You'd always be able to convert it. The ability to convert into some other asset is what gives a currency strength. When dollars were backed by gold, people had the option of going to the bank and getting gold in exchange for their dollars at whatever the prevailing rate was at the time. And then obviously various private actors could produce this type of currency, and we could see if that worked. But I'm sure in a world where we deregulated the ability to produce money, there would be many more ideas, and there'd be some losers, and there'd be some winners, and the market would sort it out.
I want to go into kind of that part of it, but I want to understand your cloud computing idea. This is the idea that you would go out and buy, say, some amount of credits or some amount of electricity and compute power.
Yeah, and not electricity, because electricity is hard to deliver. I can't just I need a lot of infrastructure to take in many megawatts of. But computing power, I can pretty much access as many cycles, as much compute that I'm willing to pay for. So this currency, these certificates, whatever you want to call it, would be convertible into maybe it's an hour of computing time on some level of computer, and I wouldn't have to actually convert that. It's the fact that I could convert it that gives the certificate value. Over time, of course, computers get better, they get faster, so you could pay interest on that currency to make sure that it held up to the improvements in the technological capabilities of computers that are likely to continue to happen over time.
It's hard to imagine the federal government ever giving up the ability to control who has the power of the currency. It's like something that they have so strongly put their arms around it that people can't even imagine that there was a time before the government issued money or had this ability. And now their ability to say, not only do we control the currency, but if you transact in larger amounts than, say, $10,000, we get to look into any aspect of you that we want.
Yeah, it's important for people to understand that prior to the Federal Reserve, even though dollars were backed by gold, private banks could issue their own gold, their own certificate, their own dollars, and they might create a discount if people were worried that they couldn't cover all the money that they had issued. And it's one of the reasons when you walked into a bank, you saw this huge vault and all the security there, because people wanted to know that their money or their gold was safe. And so it wasn't the government, there wasn't the Federal Reserve printing dollars. But as you say, the federal government, they say they hate monopolies, but they love the monopoly when they hold it. They're always accusing businesses of being monopolies, but the real monopoly that you have to worry about is the one the federal government has, in this case, money creation. And you're right, it's not only for the ability to control and monitor what people spend and do. It's also that they make money. The Federal Reserve makes money from seigniorage. The dollar bills that they print dollar bills, and they buy treasuries. Sometimes other things too, as they did during the crisis, but primarily treasuries from the federal government. Those treasuries earn interest. The dollars they produce don't produce interest, so they make money on that difference. It's called seigniorage. Now they've gotten into trouble because they pay because they're worried about some of the monetary effects. They bought all these bonds. And they pay interest on these reserves that private banks hold at the Fed. So they're paying roughly 5.5% on these overnight loans, and their bonds are only depending where they are, their bonds may only be earning 3.5%, 4.5%. So they're losing money now, and the amount of their losses is in the hundreds of billions of dollars right now. In theory, Congress is supposed to back that. They're not they don't have to give the Fed money. The Fed lists it on its balance sheet, but the Fed is actually technically bankrupt. I mean, because they can produce their own, they can pay off their own bills. they're not going to go bankrupt the way a private company would, but their assets are less than their liabilities at this point. They hope to earn their way out of it as they did, prior to the recent tightening cycle. They were earning more on their long treasury holdings than they were. They were essentially paying zero when short-term rates were close to zero. They weren't paying anything, so that difference they were accumulating that, and they actually were paying the treasury every year substantial amounts of money. But that game is over, and probably is not going to come back no time soon, if ever.
I think most people are stunned when they realize that the Federal Reserve is not actually a part of the U.S. government, right? You kind of just assume like, oh, there's the Fed and the Treasury, and I don't really know how they work, but they're all a part of the government. But explicitly, the Fed is not a part of the government. And this makes it really weird. It's like there's one private corporation that gets to set so much of the U.S. policy, although we don't have any control over who's on their board of governors, how they set up their balance sheets, when they sell, how they change interest rates. For somebody that's both a libertarian and has an understanding of currencies, this must be slightly galling to you.
Yeah, it's for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, as you said, the sort of monopoly that's been set up, although the president does get to appoint some of the Fed governors and, of course, the head of the Fed. But more importantly, the other reason is that it means the way the Fed does business is that you don't have markets setting interest rates up and down. The Fed sets the short-term interest rate, and you could get 12, 20, 100 of the smartest people in the world, and you're not going to come up with the right interest rate. The reason that the Soviet Union failed wasn't because they didn't have some smart people. They had very well educated, very smart people there, but you don't put them in a room and have them decide what the price of wheat is or what the price of corn is. You let the markets do that, and you need to let the markets decide the price of money. And it's probably the most important price the economy has, because the price of money it affects all other business decisions, consumer decisions that are being made. So you have the most important price in the economy is being given, the power of decisions being given to a handful of people, a couple of handfuls of people. They don't even get to that position through their professional expertise. They get there through their political connections, and they're very smart people. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like they had they had to win some sort of contest to get to the position. Even if they did, it still wouldn't work, because, as I said, markets are the best source of deciding prices. Not that they're perfect either, but at least in a market system, you have a feedback mechanism that can allow self-correction. When the Fed makes a mistake, they may not realize it for a long time, as is what happened recently. When policy was too easy coming out of COVID and inflation got sparked. They at least they've seemed to have done a better job since then, but you just don't have that feedback mechanism that you have with in a true market system.
Yeah, and the way that they communicate information, it's almost like wizards coming out of their cave to be able to then tell you what that interest rate's going to be.
It's very much like when they elect the Pope in Rome, in the Vatican, you get the gray smoke. I forget which it is. You get the gray smoke when they elect somebody. The black, I think which way it goes. And in the Fed, they send out some a gray-haired person to explain not necessarily explain the decisions that they make every couple of months or so. It's really a ridiculous idea. I'm confident that some point in the future, hopefully not because of some disaster that the system is creating, but the people will look back on the system. It'll be a brief interlude in the vast history of money, and they'll just shake their head. It'll be right there with bleeding people with leeches to to cure them of some mysterious ailment.
What do you think of these countries like that are coming together with the Brics currency, or people suggesting that perhaps the petrodollar, it won't always be pegged to the U.S. dollar? How feasible are these ideas in the short to medium term?
I mean, there's a case for smaller countries. Argentina is actually one that I was just talking to somebody about the other day. There's a good case for that they should have dollarized. Javier Milei, this libertarian president, was elected the end of last year, and it said he was going to dollarize, but he's been slow to it for what seems to be various political reasons. They have inflation running, so I don't know the exact number, but it's been something at about 150% a year, which is actually down from where it had been. And it's been coming down some, but if you dollarize, you would have gotten rid of that inflation.
What does that mean, dollarize?
It essentially means that the U.S. dollar would become the legal currency in Argentina. There would be at whatever the rate is when you make that decision. We're going to convert X number of pesos for $1, and it's been done in other countries. Ecuador did it several years ago. There've been other cases. And these are generally small countries that had historically had lots of money printing and inflation as a result, and you remove the ability of the federal government, the central bank, essentially you eliminate, and the central bank is the source of mischief in these countries because they just constantly print money to cover whatever the government is spending, and that's what had been causing these great inflations in these countries.
And you think these countries that are having free fall economies, right, where inflation is running wild, you would say the U.S., despite the criticisms we were just listing, would be the good thing to hook their currency to the dollar?
Yeah, you could say, it's because the U.S. The fact is the U.S. dollar is ubiquitous in the global economy, so it just makes it easy. In an ideal world, I would like to see competitive currencies in the U.S. and Europe and all over, but we're not there yet. So these countries, a country like Argentina is facing an economic crisis today, and this is these are the tools that are available.
Yeah, Argentina is one of the examples that we're going to get to see when you take these theoretical ideas on libertarianism and you start to apply them into the real world rapidly. How does this work out? I mean, I don't know how much he's been able to let go of public sector.
He's struggling, but he doesn't have full control of the Congress, and that's limited, or the courts. And so he's gotten some things done, but it may take time. He may be thwarted, unfortunately. But from what I'm told, he's very popular, even though the population is suffering with this high inflation. And there's also in the short term there's been an increase in unemployment. But the people believe him when he says, and he's completely correct, that his predecessors, the Peronis, are the ones that caused this problem. They've just abused the economy, and were awful stewards of the economy. And they're going to have to take some short-term pain, but if he can get in his reforms, then they should have a much better future. Hopefully, we'll be able to see it. And the evidence is pretty clear when you look across economies all over the world historically, that when they are able to put in reforms, I mean, there are no libertarian paradises here, in any country now or in the past. But to the extent that they were able to liberalize in the sense of cutting the excessive spending, improving their laws, privatizing national government-run businesses or other things, the economy responds very, very quickly. And we saw this in the aftermath of the Cold War, as the Eastern European countries were converting from communism to free markets, and the ones that just made the changes right away, countries like Poland, within days, there were people who were telling them, don't do it, but when they freed prices and deregulated, within days and weeks, their markets reacted, and and again, it's none of these cases are perfect, but they're pretty good, and it's a question of going in the right direction, making improvements over the status quo, and you see it time and time again that the benefits are there.
In the circles I run in, people often describe the U.S. dollar as the cleanest dirty shirt. Do you look around the world and see any other not quite as dirty shirts in terms of currencies?
No, well, you've had the situation, certainly in the post the 2008 crisis, you had very easy monetary policy around the world, with the yen and the euro. There's really three major currencies. The pound is not what it was. Prior to World War I, it was the dominant currency, but they're not up there anymore. The Chinese renminbi is not is not there yet. There's still too many regulations there, and they're a communist country. I wouldn't trust my wealth to them. So it's really those three currencies, and they all had very easy policy after 2008, and haven't quite. They have various problems since then. So that's really it. And so no, I don't see a better one. Maybe there are smaller ones in certain countries that are worth investing in. That's a separate issue. But that's different from saying we should move to one of those other currencies wholesale.
What makes a currency worth investing in? If you're saying the U.S. is the best one, but if you're a trader, you got to trade somewhere.
We do. I'm not going to discuss our current positions, but our book is fairly complicated. We're long and short things. We're quantitative traders, and we're hoping to make money regardless of what scenarios play out. We're looking to not have very high volatility and sort of grind out returns by having lots of relative value plays on, not only between currencies, but various interest rate plays in these countries that we trade in. Also commodities, we're long and short. So we might have small directional positions, but we're not like sort of the traditional macro funds where they say, we're buying dollars hand over fist, or we're selling dollars, or we're shorting this country or that. Different style.
In your long career, you have done many things, one of which was doing some setting the line for betting. And it sounds remarkably similar when you're talking about doing currency trading, that it's a little bit like that. If you're going to be the house, you have to make sure that you're taking money in and money out. What does the average person not know about sports betting that you do, since you were in this game for a while?
Well, I didn't set the line, but I bet on the line. But the betting line as the markets, the currency markets is just another type of market, and you have people on both sides. Obviously, the currency markets are many times larger than even the Super Bowl. The amount of money that gets bet on the Super Bowl. But I think people do have this sense that the bookmakers know something, and they set the line, and that's it. The bookmakers, the ones that stay in business, are market makers, and they might set the line, and as money comes in, they're going to adjust the line. They're not trying to make a bet on who's going to win who's going to cover the point spread. They're trying to balance their books. They want roughly as much money bet on one team as the other team. and that's how they make money by making that spread. Just as market makers in the financial world are not trying to predict the markets. They're trying to buy at the bid and sell at the offer. And that's their business. And you can't do it perfect. You can't be perfectly balanced. So you're going to have you may have some more money on team A than on team B, but you have the odds. It's like betting on a fair coin, but you're getting odds both ways. Someone's giving you 11 to 10 odds on whether it comes up heads or tails. So you don't care whether you have heads or tails, but someone's going to give me 11 to 10. I'll take that bet all day long. Now, I'm not going to bet my life savings on it because obviously you have a 50 chance of winning. But I'll take a calculated risk or a calculated size bet size on that.
When you think about the stock market and betting, how do you differentiate? Is investing in the stock market substantially different from betting in a game?
Well, when you buy a stock, you are buying real assets, and hopefully you're buying productive assets if you're buying a good company. Now you might be paying too high a price for those assets, but that's the difference between investing and sort of pure betting on the roulette wheel. With betting on sports, if you're smart and really pay attention to it, you can get an edge, and there are people who can do it as a profession, and that's a different game because you're not there's no asset there, but you're using your wits to try and gauge who's going to win by how much. But on the other side, it's a market, and you're trying to, in both cases, and you can have a great company or good company at a very high price or too high a price, and you can have a so-so company at a very cheap price. Warren Buffett's one of the secrets to success is that he always says, I just want to buy a good company or a great company at a fair price, and he doesn't want to own a bad company at a really cheap price, even though for some people, there are people who do look for companies like that, what they call deep value investors, who try to find a crumpled up dollar bill selling for 20 cents. There's all sorts of niches in the investment game.
So speaking of investing, you have done a great deal of investing throughout your lifetime. Notably, you were one of the early investors in Amazon. I think there are people that dream of having the chance to invest in something like that. But what did Amazon look like when you were first getting the opportunity to put your money into it?
It was just an idea. I was very fortunate and lucky enough to work with Jeff Bezos before he started Amazon. We worked at a hedge fund, D.E. Shaw, together many years ago, and he had this idea, and the idea was originally just to sell books. So, there wasn't anything else. Although I think in the back of his head, he thought if books could be successful, other things could be successful. But for the first several years, the total focus was books, and he saw the advantages that an online bookseller would have over bricks and mortars. Not that he thought he would replace. The idea wasn't to replace the traditional Barnes and Noble or the local bookstore. It was just to give consumers another option, to give them more choices, and it's really been an amazing experience just to see that from the sidelines grow from this idea to be one of the largest companies in the world.
Yeah, and there were many years where they were defying what people thought of as the proper way to do it. I remember their price to earnings ratio. I held some Amazon, and a close family friend would always give me a hard time about it because he'd look at their P&E, it just doesn't work. And so, but they were reinvesting all that money into their company.
Yeah, the people didn't always understand the company. I remember a few years after they were public, and a fairly smart friend, Wall Street guy, was shorting Amazon. He said, you look at their valuation, and they need to sell like 10 times more books than that are published each year, or that are sold each year. It's impossible. But he didn't see, and I would make the case to him, well, they're not just going to be selling books at some point. They're going to be, think CDs were the next choice, and eventually they added many other stores, and now they have just about everything you could imagine on there. And so people, even smart people, can get fooled unless they really understand the company. Now, it doesn't mean that every company that has a high PE and even they may be trying to tell a good story is going to be able to replicate that. There's certainly there's a long or there's a big cemetery of failed companies who try to or at least were telling a story similar to that couldn't pull it off. So you have to be careful, and this was just something that I got very fortunate with.
The famous marketing professor Scott Galloway recently on a podcast said that advertising in its traditional sense is dead because, in large part, companies like Amazon figured out, if I can give you service so that you can get your sunglasses delivered in 24 hours or 48 hours, you don't really care about the advertising. You want those sunglasses now. I think it's fascinating that they've continued to push the entire market into different ways, including something like advertising.
Yeah, the advertising has become a very important and big part of their business. Advertising, just not only on the website, but now they do a small amount of advertising on Prime, or you can opt out of it, but paying an extra few dollars a month. They also have an advantage that they see how the advertising works a lot better than, let's say, the linear TV guys. The old story in advertising with the marketing guy at a company says, half of my money I spend on advertising gets wasted. I just don't know which half it is. But with Amazon and a lot of other, not just Amazon, but they get better insights into which ads are working and what products actually are selling as a result of those ads. So it's I don't know what the number is, but it's a substantial and very quickly growing part of their business.
So recently, most of the stock market gains are really coming from 7 companies. This feels very unsettling, although maybe it's just a Pareto distribution. Does this concern you that only so much of the stock market's gains are coming from just these 7 companies, or is this just the way of the world?
I think it's, I think that the stock market has broadened out a little bit in the recent months, despite a little bit of a sell-off in the last couple of weeks. I think that people don't fully comprehend these companies have gotten so large that they can start doing things that may not be possible with companies at a smaller scale, and they're also they're investing tons and tons into capital expenditures. I think AI is a huge. We are in the very early days of what AI I think is going to be able to accomplish. I think it's an enormous opportunity, and these companies are they're in on the ground floor, but it also takes tremendous amount of capital to at least right now, to exploit a lot of this and to put your stake in the ground. So I think it's not necessarily a bad signal. I mean, certainly there were times in the past, and you go back into the late 60s, early 70s, where they had what was called the Nifty 50, which turned out to be a top in the stock market before there was a big bear market in the early 70s. I think it's a little different, but yes, you do need other companies to participate, and I think there are going to be other companies participating. That small companies that some are going to be able to get large very, very quickly. But with any new technology, there'll be winners and losers. But the ability to use that technology, we're going to start seeing it in many other fields.
Yeah, I think the ability to use some of these technologies, we started off talking about cloud computing and then AI. We've also mentioned Bitcoin. All of these things require massive electric generation. And it's a question as to whether or not whichever country is going to win is going to largely be determined by, can you generate enough electricity to make these things feasible? Do you think our regulatory system is set up for the amount of energy generation we need to be doing?
It's a good question. I'm definitely not an expert on it, but it's pretty clear that it was a mistake not to have more nuclear power, and now it's something that should appeal to people who are worried about carbon emissions and fossil fuels. Nuclear is solves a lot of problems. I think certainly we still have a lot of ability to generate energy through fossil fuels, but even things like solar and other alternatives are constantly getting better. They're constantly getting cheaper. So I think the wherewithal is there if we let markets operate. But the big question, as you said, it's whether the regulatory system will be as flexible as needed. But the markets, if allowed to operate, I'm confident will be able to provide this increase in energy it's already being seen, and will be continued to see. And it's not just the ability to produce energy, but you need the grid to be upgraded to transmit that energy to where it's needed.
Yeah, and I wonder, because of the way we approach nuclear, there weren't nuclear engineering jobs available. So if somebody went to college to study nuclear engineering, they came out and there was nobody there to hire them, or very few places. And so I think if we decided, hey, all right, we're going to deregulate this and all of a sudden allow nuclear power, we're going to actually have to create new engineers and even the professors to train those engineers because of how much demand we'll have.
It's a good point. I mean, there has been some work. I mean, actually that Bill Gates, I know, was involved in building or at least designing these much smaller nuclear reactors that are easier to build and maintain, and don't need as big or shouldn't need as big a regulatory scrutiny as the large reactors that we're used to seeing. I think people will get dragged into this, if the market incentives allow. And I think, also it's something where, as with everything in engineering, AI is going to have a huge positive impact, in that area as well as everything else. It's a solvable problem, but it's definitely an issue as people didn't go into that field as you mentioned, because why should they? It was dead end.
I mean, we've definitely seen that with aerospace engineers. I know the ones that came out of school weren't getting to design planes. They were sitting in bureaucratic meetings. I know because this is what my wife went through. Yeah. And now, people weren't then told when they were in high school, oh, you should go become an aerospace engineer. And now when we need them the most, they're just not there.
Yeah.
Well, so another thing that you and I talked about when I was out in New York was you were the first person to ever lay out the case for nanotechnology for me. When I read a book about nanotechnology, it seemed so far away as to be science fiction and not even something I could wrap my brain around. When you think about nanotechnology, what is this field and what do you think the potential is there?
Again, I'm definitely not an expert here, but the ability to to control things at smaller and smaller scale is important. So if you look at Moore's law, which is that semiconductor chips become faster roughly every 18 months or so. The reason that they were able to do that is because circuits, they were shrinking over time. But you get to the point where you're doing things at the atomic level, and the other part of it, which is called Rock's law, is that the fabs, these manufacturing facilities that build the semiconductor wafers, produce them, they're doubling in price at the same time, and you're roughly on that same scale. So, being able to create tools to operate on that smallest scale is a way to not only reduce costs, but it's also a way to create new technologies that you couldn't create otherwise, and new capabilities for as well. And I'm involved with a company called Nanotronics on their board, and they're working on building these completely automated fabrication facilities to build a different type of semiconductor chip than people, not like the AI chip that say NVIDIA uses, but these chips that are useful in controlling power consumption that are needed. And it's also addresses the power issue that you mentioned earlier. They allow for much more efficient use of power. So you can get a 3x or 4x improvement. Essentially use a quarter of the power in the same device with using these other types of chips. So this is as with AI, this is very early days. These are, and they're all connected. These things, and the manufacturing facility that Nanotronics is working on, the actual manufacturing process is designed by AI. They've used that to help figure out how to it's not just robots that get programmed. It's devising, it's using AI in manufacturing, which is also at its infancy. So it's very, very exciting times.
Yeah, you mentioned Nanotronics. The man that wrote the book that I read, Matthew Putman, it was so forward-leaning, his book, that I think of myself as being somebody that's like very open to new ideas. I wrote him back and was like, "Nah, man, this is way too out there," not realizing he was actually running the very company of the book he was talking about.
Yeah. No, he's in there, doing it, and he is the brilliant guy who he's the scientist and him the CEO of the company. And he's doing a fantastic job. I mean, he's got a lot of other brilliant people working for him, of course, as well. And this is looks like it's going to become a reality.
And you also have you've run several companies, but you have one, MagiQ. Talk a little bit about what that company does and where you think it will go in the future.
So MagiQ started in 1999, and the focus was on quantum computing and other things in that area called quantum information. This is the idea of quantum information, is that in regular digital technology we use bits, zeros and ones. In the quantum world, we have quantum bits, qubits, that can be, because of the weirdness of quantum mechanics, could be 0 and 1 at the same time. So they can do all sorts of things that digital computers, digital things cannot do. On the other hand, they can't do things. They're not just like a replacement; they're an adjunct. But the progress went very slowly. We built the world's first quantum cryptographic device in the early 2000s. This uses the laws of physics, quantum mechanics, to distribute encryption keys from point to point. So it was very cool technology, but it did not sell very well, frankly. But the research that went into that led us to develop these optical sensors that are being tested now in oil and gas exploration to replace electronic sensors that are used for all sorts of purposes, not just, say, seismic activity, but measuring pressure in wells, environmental monitoring, which has become very important. Companies have to monitor how much carbon is being emitted, methane, and we can do all that. And the big advantage over electronic sensors, which are used now, is that our optical sensors can be used at very high temperatures. As you drill deeper, the temperatures get very warm. The electrical sensors can burn out. Even at lower temperatures, they don't last, so they have to get replaced. Optical instruments can also get essentially a much greater bandwidth of information, so you can analyze things in ways where you get more information basically than you do with these electronic sensors. So it's still in the testing phase. We're cautiously optimistic with that, and hopefully we'll see some commercial success there soon. We also do some classified work for the Department of Defense around communication technology as well.
So with your experience in quantum computing, one of the things that the Bitcoin world is always a little nervous about is that SHA-256 will be cracked if you have quantum computing. What do you think? Is that a possibility? Is SHA-256 vulnerable to quantum computing?
Well, all the encryption that use these various mathematical techniques, they're not provably secure. You've had great mathematical minds who are unable to figure out a way to crack them, but it hasn't happened. So they're assumed to be, and I think that assumption is fairly safe, that they're safe from some sort of computational algorithm. It doesn't have to be from a quantum algorithm. There might be an algorithm you could run on a regular computer if someone devises that. But that risk is out there. That some smart kid in India or China or someplace, maybe in America, figures out the algorithm. Yeah, that there is a way to do this with classical methods, and that was the advantage of quantum computing, of quantum cryptography. Is that you had a secure protocol that didn't rely on mathematical complexity, but it used physical laws to guarantee the security. The people who are a lot smarter and knowledgeable about these cryptographic algorithms are fairly confident in the ability to stay one step ahead of improvements, whether it's in these type of algorithms I talked about that maybe could solve these problems, or just advances in quantum computing or other technologies that might be able to crack them. But it's definitely it's a risk.
Well, we're about out of time, but I have one question I think maybe is a little unique, because I've had a chance to meet some of your family and your friends, and you have very strong, close relationships with a small group of people. And if you were going to give advice to somebody looking to have a great family and close friends, what advice would you have for them?
I think, as with anything in life, that you get out of it what you put into it. And, if you cherish your family as you should, and your friends, and particularly I'm very blessed to have a number of friends that I grew up with. I mean, from the time I was in second grade, and you have to tend to that, and the reward is there if you do, and spend time, be a good friend, be a good family member. Obviously, particularly with family, they're going to have disagreements and bumps in the road, but remember that they're your family, and you only get one. You meet new people, but you only get one set of family, and it's good to have.
Well, Bob Gelfond, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.